It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Ava Reynolds, a young Navy sailor, sat in her small, dimly lit room aboard the USS Integrity. The ship was docked in Norfolk, Virginia, awaiting its next mission. At just 22, Ava had been in the Navy for nearly 3 years, but something had been weighing on her. She had joined to serve her country and make a difference, yet lately she felt adrift. Her motivation was fading, and she questioned whether her service truly mattered. As the ship's engines hummed in the background, Ava stared at a blank sheet of paper, pen in hand, her fingers trembling slightly. She was about to write to a man who had shaped the nation and inspired millions, Donald Trump. Despite the political controversies of his presidency, she admired his leadership and strong support for the military. Why not, she thought. Maybe he'll have words of wisdom for someone like me. Her pen moved slowly across the page, forming the first lines of a letter that would unknowingly change her life. Ava's message was simple, but sincere. She poured out her feelings, explaining how she'd been struggling with her purpose in the Navy and questioning whether she was truly living up to the ideals she once held. She spoke of the missions she'd served on, the bond with her fellow sailors, and the doubts that had been growing inside her. "I'm just a small part of something bigger, Mr. Trump," she wrote. "Sometimes I wonder if what I'm doing really matters. I joined the Navy to serve, to make a difference. But now I'm not so sure I've found my place. I feel stuck, and I don't know how to keep going." She finished the letter, folded it carefully, and sealed it in an envelope addressed to the former president. She didn't expect a reply, who would? But something inside her urged her to send it anyway. She needed to reach out. As Ava dropped the letter into the mailbox, she had no idea her words would soon reach the desk of one of the most powerful men in America, and that his response would change her career forever. Weeks passed, and life on the USS Integrity went on with drills, briefings, and long shifts. Ava tried to forget about the letter, though a small part of her still held on to hope. Then, one cold morning, as she walked toward the galley, she noticed a sailor standing by the mailroom, holding an envelope that looked official. And then she saw it, the distinctive seal of the White House. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Had he actually responded? Ava rushed to the mailroom, her thoughts racing. The envelope felt heavier in her hands as she opened it slowly, revealing a letter that made her fingers tremble with anticipation. Inside was a simple, neatly typed message with a signature at the bottom. Ava read it carefully, her eyes moving over each word that would soon shift the direction of her life. "Dear Ava, thank you for your heartfelt letter. I understand the doubts you're facing. The life of service isn't always easy, and it's natural to question the impact you're making. But I want you to know this. Every person in the military, including you, plays a vital role in protecting the safety and freedom of our nation. Your service matters more than you can ever fully understand. Keep pushing forward. You may not always see the immediate effects of your hard work, but trust me, what you do makes a difference. Never forget that. Thank you for your service. Sincerely, Donald J. Trump." As she finished reading, Ava felt a wave of emotion, gratitude, disbelief, and a powerful sense of renewed purpose. It was brief, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. The days after receiving Trump's letter passed in a blur, but Ava couldn't ignore the shift she felt inside. The self-doubt that had lingered for months began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of clarity. She realized that her service, no matter how small it sometimes seemed, was part of something greater. Reflecting on her time in the Navy, Ava thought about the missions, the sacrifices, and the bonds she'd formed along the way. Every sailor, every task, every moment had meaning, even when it wasn't obvious. With renewed determination, she poured herself into her duties, pushed harder, took on more responsibilities, and connected with her crew in ways she hadn't before. She understood now that her efforts mattered, even if the impact wasn't always visible. Standing on the deck of the USS Integrity, staring out at the vast ocean, Ava thought about the letter she had written and the one that came back. They felt like a weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As she looked around at the sailors working beside her, Ava saw more than uniforms. She saw individuals with their own stories and reasons for serving. Some were escaping hard pasts. Others, like her, were searching for purpose. She realized they were all united by a shared mission, and it wasn't about recognition or medals. It was about camaraderie, commitment, and pride in serving something greater than themselves. Then, weeks after receiving Trump's letter, an unexpected announcement echoed over the ship's intercom. "Sailor Reynolds, report to the communications room immediately." Ava's heart pounded as she hurried to the room, unsure of what to expect. There, the communications officer handed her a sealed envelope bearing the official White House seal. Her hands trembled as she opened it and began to read. "Dear Ava, I've read about your dedication and your efforts in the Navy. Your commitment to serving our country is truly commendable. I would like to extend an invitation for you to visit the White House to meet with me and discuss your experiences. Please let us know if you are able to make the trip. Sincerely, Donald J. Trump." Ava stared at the letter in disbelief. This wasn't just a reply. It was an invitation to meet the president in person. Standing in the communications room, she tried to process what she was holding. She had never imagined something like this. Thoughts rushed through her mind. How to arrange the trip, the time away from duty, the complications it might bring. But beneath all the questions, one thing was clear. This was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. And in that moment, she made her decision. She would go. She knew she had to meet the man who had inspired her, the one whose words had reignited her purpose. Ava's mind raced as she packed her bags. The invitation to the White House felt unreal. She never imagined Trump's response would lead to something so extraordinary. It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and she was determined not to waste. She double-checked everything, uniform, shoes, paperwork, wanting to be flawless. The idea of representing her fellow sailors filled her with a deep sense of responsibility. When her shipmates heard the news, they were stunned. "You're actually going to meet the president?" they asked, eyes wide. Ava nodded, though inside she was still trying to grasp it all. She had spent so long doubting her place in the Navy, wondering if she truly made a difference. Now she knew her service mattered, and even someone as powerful as Donald Trump had noticed. As the plane took off, Ava gazed out at the endless sky, thinking about everything she had left behind. But she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, and to meet the man who had reignited her passion for serving her country. The flight felt like a bridge between two worlds, the familiar past and an unknown future unfolding before her. When Ava arrived at the White House, she was led through grand halls, each room more breathtaking than the last. The weight of history rested on her shoulders, and though nerves crept in, she steadied herself. This was the moment she had dreamed of, both thrilling and overwhelming. Inside the Oval Office, President Trump stood to greet her warmly. "Sailor Reynolds, it's an honor," he said, his voice strong yet kind, inviting her to sit. The room held a serious importance, softened by a surprising warmth. They spoke at length, Ava sharing her doubts and struggles in the Navy, while Trump listened carefully, nodding. "You're not alone in feeling this way," he said. "Leadership is tough, but sometimes the quiet moments are the most important. They're what build your legacy." Ava left the meeting feeling both grounded and inspired. It wasn't just about meeting a powerful leader. It was the reassurance that her doubts were shared by many, even those at the highest levels of leadership. The conversation with President Trump stayed with her long after she left the White House. His words about leadership, service, and the importance of believing in one's purpose resonated more deeply than she expected. He told her the military was more than just a job. It was a calling. "What you do matters, even when it's hard to see the impact," he said. Those words echoed in her mind as she boarded the plane back to Norfolk. Ava realized she had been searching for external validation, but what she truly needed was to believe in herself and her role. She didn't need others to tell her she was making a difference. She had to see it herself. This wasn't just about earning recognition from the president. It was about realizing that even the smallest acts of service can leave a lasting impact. When Ava returned to the ship, she felt different, empowered and no longer doubting her path. Instead, she embraced it with a renewed sense of purpose. Her return to the USS Integrity marked a new chapter in her career. The doubts that had weighed on her began to fade, replaced by pride and determination. She threw herself into her work with fresh energy, taking on more responsibilities and seeking chances to grow as a leader. Her fellow sailors noticed the change. She was more confident and ready to step up when it counted. Ava became someone others could rely on, a leader who didn't just talk about leadership, but showed it through her actions. She mentored younger sailors, sharing the lessons she had learned along the way. She reminded them that their service mattered, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant their roles. As Ava looked out over the ship's deck, she realized she had found her purpose, not in recognition or awards, but in the quiet moments of service. She was part of something much bigger than herself, and that was enough. She found the strength to lead, not because she was perfect, but because she was committed to something greater. Ava's new sense of purpose was soon tested when a new mission came from command, and she was given a leadership role. It was a tough operation, requiring careful planning and coordination. Ava was tasked with overseeing sailors responsible for preparing the ship for deployment. At first, it felt overwhelming. She wasn't sure she was ready for such responsibility. But then she remembered the conversation she had with President Trump had told her, "You don't need to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to find them." Taking a deep breath, Ava threw herself into the task. She worked late into the night, coordinating with other departments to make sure everything was ready. As the days passed, she began to see the results of her hard work. The sailors she led performed excellently, and the ship was prepared for deployment ahead of schedule. The mission brought challenges, but Ava realized she had grown. She wasn't just following orders anymore, she was leading with confidence and purpose. In that moment, she understood leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, doing the work, and lifting others up along the way. Ava's leadership on the mission had a lasting impact, and her team's success Ava's leadership quickly became the talk of the ship. Other sailors began seeking her guidance and advice, and she gladly shared her experiences. She learned that leadership wasn't just about giving orders, it was about inspiring others to reach their full potential. She started noticing the impact she had on her fellow sailors, even in small moments. When a young sailor nervously approached her about his upcoming deployment, she took the time to sit with him and offer encouragement. "You're not alone in this," she said. "We all have doubts. It's how we face them that defines us." Word of Ava's mentorship spread, and soon more sailors came to her for advice. She found herself stepping into a new role, one she hadn't expected but fully embraced, as not just a leader, but a mentor and source of support for those who needed it most. Her journey was no longer just about her own success. It had sparked a ripple effect, inspiring those around her to believe in themselves and their place in the Navy. Months passed, and Ava's career continued to grow. She earned promotions, took on more responsibilities, and gained the respect of those around her. But what mattered most wasn't the recognition, it was the difference she made in the lives of the sailors she mentored. They came to her with questions and doubts, and left with renewed purpose. Ava's legacy was shaping itself not through grand gestures, but in everyday acts of leadership and kindness. She saw the impact she had on everyone, from seasoned sailors to new recruits, becoming someone they trusted and looked up to. It wasn't always easy. There were still hard days and moments of self-doubt, but Ava understood that her journey wasn't about being perfect. It was about doing her best, lifting others and leaving a positive mark wherever she could. Like ripples in water, the effects of her actions spread far beyond what she could see, and even when results weren't visible, she knew she was making a real difference. Ava knew her efforts were making a difference, one sailor at a time. One afternoon she received a letter unlike any other. It was from the White House. Her heart raced as she opened it, curious about the message inside. The letter invited her to a special ceremony, honoring her service and leadership. She could hardly believe it. Just a few years earlier, she had been struggling with her purpose, doubting her place in the Navy. Now she was being recognized for the very qualities she once questioned. The invitation was proof that her journey had come full circle, an acknowledgement not just of her achievements, but of the quiet everyday actions that had shaped her path. The ceremony, set in Washington, D.C., would be another defining moment in her career. It wasn't about fame or the spotlight. It was about sharing her story and inspiring others to find purpose, even in the toughest times. Standing on the stage, hearing the applause of her fellow sailors, Ava reflected on how far she had come from the uncertain young sailor she once was. Ava had started as the young sailor who wrote a letter to the president, and now she stood before them as a confident leader, honored for her achievements. The ceremony was deeply humbling, but it wasn't just about the awards. It was about the journey that led her there. As she accepted the honor, her mind went back to the letter she had written, the response she received, and the meeting that changed everything. She remembered all the people who supported her along the way and realized this moment wasn't just her success, it was theirs too. Ava's story showed the power of perseverance, self-belief, and the quiet moments that truly matter. It wasn't about being perfect, but about showing up, doing the work, and lifting others as you rise. Leaving the stage, the weight of the moment settled in. She had come so far from the uncertain sailor who once sought guidance. She had found that guidance, but even more importantly, she had found herself. She thought back to her meeting with President Trump, to the words he shared with her, "Your service matters," became a turning point in Ava's life. It was the moment she understood that, even if the impact of her service wasn't always visible, it was still deeply important. Now, at the height of her career, Ava stood surrounded by fellow sailors who looked up to her as a leader. More than that, she had become a mentor, someone who helped others face their own doubts and challenges. It wasn't about awards or recognition. It was about knowing her journey truly made a difference, and to Ava that meant everything. Years later, she would reflect on her path with pride and fulfillment. She had guided countless young sailors, sharing her story and reminding them that their service mattered. What began as a simple letter to the president had grown into a legacy of leadership, mentorship, and dedication. Ava knew her journey was just one among many, but she was proud of the impact she had made. She found her purpose in the Navy and, in doing so, inspired others to find theirs. Her story was proof that even the smallest actions, whether writing a letter or offering encouragement, could change the course of a life.